program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law. Welcome to Lawline with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now, we introduce our guests and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Lawline. The New York metropolitan market is in the midst of a real estate resurgence. For the first time since the recession of the 80s, we're seeing development in both residential and commercial markets. Today we'll find out what areas are hot and what is not. Where are the developers putting their money? With us is Barbara Corcoran, president of the Corcoran Group, who has over 200 brokers out there selling real estate. Hello, Barbara. How are you?
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Tell me, where is the real estate market? You heard my introduction.
Well, you pretty much summarized this. I don't know why you invited me here, but it has recovered to a large degree, depending upon the price range you're speaking of. Also, we've had tremendous activity. It seems as though people have regained confidence in buying in Manhattan, which is more than welcome.
What is the active part of the market now?
The most active is actually the area where we have the least supply, which is the largest, most expensive units. There's just not enough inventory. There are a lot of people within business within Manhattan making a lot of money wanting to buy expensive apartments, and there's not enough to choose from.
So what are we talking about when you say the largest expensive units? Define, what does that mean?
I would say at this point in the marketplace, if you could freeze in time, which of course you can't, I would say anything above $650,000, anything that's 5 rooms or larger, or what we call as brokers family apartments.
When you say 5 rooms, is that, I always can never figure out what's a room or what's not a room. Does that mean
either.
2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms? What are we
It
talking
usually
about?
means 2 bedrooms and a maid's room, or 2 bedrooms and a formal dining room, or 2 bedrooms and a something, and you could fill in the
And
blank.
how many square feet normally makes a large apartment that is in demand today?
I would say roughly 1,100 square feet and larger is the hottest part of the market right now.
And if I said in the last 12 months, has this market gone up 3%, 5%, more?
On the best streets in town in the last 6 months only, which is where we've seen the greatest surge in pricing, close to 10% on the best streets in town, like Central Park West, Fifth Avenue, Park Avenue. When you go off the very prestige streets and look at the large apartments, they've gone up more like 3 to 4% in 6 months. But remember, it's 6 months. That's a lot of appreciation.
Are we talking co-ops? Are we talking condos?
Condos always do better than co-ops. Of course, most of the prestige streets in town mostly have co-ops, so you don't really have a choice there. But with the condominiums around town that appeal to so many people that the co-op does not appeal to, the appreciation traditionally, and particularly lately, has been much better.
In the condo market?
In the condo market.
However, as you pointed out, on Park Avenue, on Fifth Avenue, I assume there are few and far between.
There are a handful of condominiums on Park and Fifth, and 1 or 2 condominiums on Central Park West. So they're coveted, they're competed for, and particularly when you add the variable of being a large family unit, they are bid up in price. We have situations where people have made a bid, and that very same day there are 2 or 3 other people bidding up the price, sometimes exceeding 15% of the sale price.
What a difference between now and just a few years ago.
Exactly. Who would have believed it?
My God. Actually, you did, and that's what you told me a few years ago.
But brokers are suspect. No one believes a broker.
Now, what about on the other end of the market, the 1 bedrooms or the large, small 2 bedrooms?
That's more of a recent story. The studios and 1 bedrooms just have started to creep up, and I say creep up because if you were to ask me in the last year in that category, they've only gone up, in some instances, 1%, maybe 2%. But that they've started to go up clearly means that even the bottom of the market has turned the corner. So I could officially say the market overall is recovering.
So first question, if I look to buy an apartment now in the city, would I look, and I only need a 1 bedroom, is that a good place? Is it now a good time to buy?
It's a great time to buy, and if you're particularly courageous and you don't want to miss the bottom, because everyone likes to buy at the bottom. I always think the best time to buy is near the bottom, right as you're coming off of it, because it's more reassuring to buy. buy.
Right.
But if you're buying a one-bedroom right now, where you get your greatest appreciation, I think, at this point in the marketplace, is in the offbeat locations, what we used to refer to as up-and-coming areas, which people have stopped believing in. But those are the areas that usually have hit the bottom the lowest in the recession and recover last. But when they recover, they pick up gain very quickly.
Tell me, where are these markets? Where are these streets? Give us information.
Well, I would say the area of town right now that houses the greatest number of small units is Chelsea. Chelsea also happens in its own right to be in the midst of a resurgence. So you have Chelsea coming back strong, which is an area of town that only a couple of years ago most people said there's too many apartments and not enough people want it.
Where is that? That's the west side by 18th, 19th, 20th Street,
Yes.
21st Street, 23rd?
Generally the 20s on the west side.
Okay, where else?
Upper West Side, when I say Upper West Side, I mean above 86th Street. There's a lot of small product that has been lugging around and hasn't sold, and just recently there's a lot of activity. Over in the East Village, on Alphabet City as it's called,
A, B, and C?
A, B, and C, was it Avenues, Streets? I forget.
Avenues.
Avenues. Thank you. They're doing very well as well. Very well, not in that prices are going up, but activity is immense. And when there's activity, prices follow.
The last time you were on, you discussed the Sutton Place area. And you said, although they had beautiful apartments, for one
Riverviews.
reason at that time the market was not as active as it should be because it was held not as desirable as closer to the park. What's the situation now?
Definitely the case. People still prefer proximity to Central Park, whether or not they ever step foot in it. What has changed in the Sutton-Beekman Place area, which is a great advantage, is the suburban market has recovered. And generally the people who buy in Sutton Place are older, empty nesters from the tri-state area. So there's been a resurgence of that area simply because they've been able to sell their house in the suburbs, so therefore they're able to move back to the city.
In fact, Governor Cuomo bought an apartment right there.
Exactly.
What about lower down, let's say in the 30s, when you see all these huge condominium buildings off the FDR Drive? How are they doing?
They're doing all right, but you have to realize, too, that in that vicinity, that was last built at the tail end before we went into the recession. There's still a lot of inventory there, and it's still not really downtown, not really uptown. So from the customer's viewpoint, very often they can't place that neighborhood, so there's a little resistance in bringing people there in the first place. Once they see the views, the amenities of these super luxurious buildings along the drive there, and particularly the finishes that are so modern, you have a convinced customer, but getting them down there is still a little touch and go. Or up there, depending upon where they're coming from.
Now let's talk to the investors. If somebody wanted to invest in real estate in Manhattan and they decided, you know, I'm going to buy an apartment as an investment, where should they get the biggest bang for their buck?
Well, only in the last 6 months I've started buying apartments as an investment for myself, and what I've totally aimed for and been successful, although not as successful as I had thought I would in securing them, are small units in up-and-coming locations. I firmly believe that they're underpriced now. I firmly believe that the rental market there is enormously strong to support them, and that I'll get the best appreciation over the short haul and the long haul.
And again, what areas would those be in?
Well, where I've been doing my buying, and it doesn't mean it's the only area of town, it, for me, very often depends on how good my brokers are and how aggressive they are as bringing product to me that they think might make a good investment deal. But I bought them in the upper 80s and the low 90s on the Upper West Side. But there are a lot of pockets like this in the city where prices are still low. If I were to wait a year, I really believe the returns wouldn't be there and I'd be a little bit too late.
The other day I walked through the Upper West Side and it seemed like there was nobody over 35 years of age, and it was packed with young people.
But think of the promise in that for an investor. When you have youth who's coming into an area, they're not moving out to the suburbs quite yet. They're making their mark in the city. They have a lot of money to spend, and it fuels that area. Look at that Broadway corridor that didn't exist 15 years ago. It's a condominium corridor loaded with young people with upward mobility. That promises a good horizon for the future within that vicinity. More so, excuse me, I don't mean to hog your show here, but more so than, say, a more staid location, the Upper East Side, where the average age is probably more my age, or maybe your age, or maybe even a little older.
I should be on the Upper West Side.
Promise.
The question I have is, are there any areas of the market that you should be wary of?
I think not so much areas of the market by way of location, but I think what we have learned is a couple of hard lessons from the recession. And one that people are not soon to forget is buying into a building that financially is not secure. And the best tip-off on that kind of a building that people are still justifiably wary of is to buy into a building where the maintenance is too high. When that maintenance is much above the norm, it's indicative of an illness, something having to do with the building. And even though everybody's gung-ho again on real estate, there are ups and downs, and in the recession, when the maintenance is too high, every buyer shies away because they perceive that maintenance as something they're going to live with forever, where they perceive the price as something that's negotiable.
Let's discuss that. How do I know if my maintenance is high or low?
Well, there's a rule of thumb. If you're in a doorman building, and of course nothing's a science here, but generally you should be paying about $1 per square foot per month for your apartment by way of maintenance. If you're paying instead $1.20 or $1.25 a month, you lose that by way of value. And you double the loss when you're in the midst of a recession, when everyone's suspicious and people are afraid to step to the plate.
At the worst time in the recession, how far did the residential real estate market fall?
Well, at the worst time, which was, isn't it great what memory does? I can't even remember when the stock market crash was. 87?
87.
So it was 88 by the time everybody realized that the bell had sounded. And at that point to where we are now, on the smaller units, we've come off the bottom by a few percent, as I mentioned, but on the larger units, in some sectors by 10%. But am I answering your question? Probably not. Here comes the answer. We're off the bottom anywhere from 25, prices are still 25 to 35% cheaper than they were before we went into the recession.
So actually, they're only maybe, even on the better units, the larger units, 10% higher than they were at the bottom.
Yes.
And 25% less. So they had fallen almost 35%.
Easily. But remember, the larger apartments in the best locations fell last. So they didn't grab the headlines. They fell last, and when they fell hard. But they also recovered first, and that's why they're ahead of the pack. But this, for me, is my third recession, I'm embarrassed to admit. But each time I saw that same pattern. The most wealthy people held on the longest, but when they fell hard. But they also recovered fast, and that's why if you're rich, it's easy to stay rich in a Manhattan real estate market because you buy larger apartments.
So again, the market would certainly be 25% under where it was prior to 1988.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, what happens to those people who would like to move, who bought their apartments in 86, 87, and paid at top of the market? They're still losing money on their apartments.
Perhaps, but you know, it's not the money loss, surprisingly, that's so hard on people. It's the perception lost, or the anticipation that they've made a lot of money and been surprised by finding that the apartment wasn't worth what they had hoped it would be. Those realizations were the hardest for people to adjust to. Going back when the recession was only 1 or 2 years old, people have adjusted. People who thought they were living in $1 million property now have adjusted to the fact that it was only worth $750. Now the good news is it's worth $800. So they've made that adjustment, and it's the adjustment that's much more difficult for people, regardless of the price range, than the actual money loss. And it's the scariness of that that is most hurtful to people and shakes their confidence.
What are the best, you know, it's interesting. When you're looking at an apartment in Manhattan, you find that every 10 blocks is a different, almost like a different town.
It is, but that's the charm of Manhattan. People are very territorial and possessive about their town. And ask someone in the 70s, East 70s, where's the best part to live? Chances are they're going to tell you the East 70s. Ask someone in Murray Hill, they'll tell you only Murray Hill. And that is the charm of the city. It is a neighborhood by neighborhood existence, and for that it takes the coldness out of living here.
Now, Barbara, you have over 200 brokers with you. You're certainly one of the largest, if not the largest, residential brokerage firm here in the city. Do you see the real estate market continuing on a steady upward
It better, because I'm putting my mouth and my money there. Obviously, I'm growing my business, which is enormous overhead, so I have a great deal of confidence in Manhattan. The one thing I've learned, because I've been in the business 25 years, is Manhattan falls harder than everywhere else, but recovers better than everywhere else. There's so much variety of wealth that continues to come into this town. I've really developed a blind faith that this city rebounds and gets bigger and better, and I've never really been disappointed. In the long haul, you have your hard chapters in the city. It's a tough town, but in the long haul, it always does well.
In the 80s, it was the Japanese buying real estate in New York. Who's buying now?
In the 90s, the earlier to mid-90s, it's certainly the Chinese. People from Taiwan and Hong Kong are the major international, if that's what you're referencing, international buying group.
Right.
But you have to realize now there's a resurgence in this town, not only by way of real estate, there's a new optimism. And I think it comes from a lot of things, but the optimism is what is also fueling the real estate market. So
We
it's-
have to take a break now, but we'll
Okay.
be right back with Where Do You Spend Your Money on Real Estate? I'm Alan Schnorman. You're watching Lawline. Stay with us.
In a life-threatening emergency, you should know what to do. Say a loved one exhibits unusual symptoms. The first thing to do is... Clear! No. The first thing to do... Oh! Tourniquet! No! The first thing you do is pick up the phone and dial your emergency number.
Call 911 first.
Right.
How about mouth to mouth?
I don't think so. To learn more about life-saving techniques, contact your Red Cross.
Your approach is looking good, Cobra.
The men and women in the National Guard and Reserve face some tough challenges when they serve. Challenges that teach them discipline, leadership, and technical skills that make them better employees. So when they need time off to serve, don't make their toughest challenge approaching you.
Hello, you're watching Lawline. Today we're talking about real estate, where you should put your money and where you should buy. Our guests are Barbara Corcoran, president of the Corcoran Group, and we're just privileged to have Larry Silverstein, president of Silverstein Properties. Larry, where is the best place to invest in real estate today?
Right here in the city of New York.
I understand
Borough
that.
Manhattan.
And where? What sections are hot?
The hottest section of New York today, Midtown Manhattan, Plaza District, and then the surrounding area, and then moving down toward the Grand Central District, and then Midtown South, the West Side, the East Side.
What's
the Midtown
left?
area is really very
Now,
small.
I know you are building a large residential property on West 42nd Street. Where is that property?
It's between 11th and 12th Avenues, all the way over on the west side.
Now, of course, that is not the middle of the city.
No, it is not.
That's not near the plaza.
No, it is
Why
not
are you
near
putting
the
your money
plaza.
there?
The reason I'm putting my money there is because it's a spectacular square block that we happen to own, which we got zoned for purposes of high-rise rental housing, and we're going to end up building two 40-story towers on that site, which will provide spectacular views both of the Hudson River and the Midtown skyline.
Actually, that project being so large will probably be an anchor for the entire area.
Well, it certainly will anchor development on the west side, just as the United Nations and Tudor City anchor development on the east side of 42nd Street.
So perhaps smaller developers and investors may very well want to invest around you.
I have not a doubt that others are coming into the area as a result, and others will come. What is happening on 42nd Street now on the west side is really quite remarkable, particularly in light of the Disney commitment to the Times Square Development District between 7th and 8th Avenues. The Forest City Ratner Group has made a commitment to develop 300,000 square feet of entertainment retail.
Where is that? Also in the Times Square?
Also Times Square Development District on 42nd Street. Tishman will be building a large hotel at the corner of 42nd Street and 8th Avenue in a joint venture with the Disney interests. That will be quite spectacular. And so that project, incidentally, which started about, I think about more than 10 years ago, as being driven by four major high-rise office buildings, is no longer being driven by the office development component, but it's really being driven by hotel, entertainment, interaction, as they like to refer to it, retail. It's a synergy of diverse interests that will make the block between 7th Avenue, between Broadway and 8th Avenue, along 42nd Street, quite remarkable.
So in 10 years, it would be safe to assume that the entire area is going to look like something in the future.
That really is precisely what's happening and what will continue to happen. Had an opportunity of speaking to Frank Biondi, who heads Viacom. They today have about 2 million square feet in the area of 1515 Broadway. What's happening?
Which is in about 46th Street or so?
No. It's down around 43rd, 44th Street on Broadway. When they first came into the district, they were concerned about safety, quality of life, concern about crime. And having moved into the area, they were so pleasantly surprised with conditions that exist there and how they've improved, that their original commitment to the area, which was about 800,000 square feet, has since expanded to over 2 million square feet. When you talk to Frank, what he'll tell you, as he told us, is that crime is down in the Times Square area. Cleanliness on the streets has been a major improvement. The quality of life issues have been certainly attended to in a very major way. Panhandling, for example, is way down. People feel better about the area. He said the experience that they've had and their personnel has been so superior that they have a feeling of confidence. They're certainly aided and abetted by a first-class transportation system. There's nothing better than you have in Times Square today, with the confluence of all those major mass transit facilities coming to that area, and so access to his offices, superb.
Now, it was very interesting what you said was you're going to make the west side what the east side was because of the UN. Now, in the next perhaps 20 or 30 years, it'd be very interesting to see what happens around the west.
I think what we're going to see, Alan, is number one, we'll get about 1,800 units of rental housing built on the square block.
Enormous.
Well, two 40-story towers with about 900 units each, and we'll get those done. That will be rental housing. Built under the 80-20 program that the City of New York has been encouraging.
What is that?
It's a type of housing in which 80% of the units are market units, 20% are subsidized.
Right.
To people,
senior citizens, people in the area.
People in the area who have a median income of under 50% of what exists in the district.
The 80%, will those be luxury housing?
No, it's market rate housing. You can call it, it's whatever the market will bear in effect.
But with doorman, river views, great finishes, great space.
What are we talking about? One-bedroom apartment. What's going to cost me?
Oh, $1,600, $1,700 a month.
When is it going to be ready?
And it'll be ready the end of commencement of constructions beginning of '96, ready toward the last third quarter, fourth quarter of '97. We will have product on that block. And that first building will be finished at the end of '97.
Now, I know you own a lot of commercial real estate, both downtown and midtown. Tell me the status of commercial real estate.
Office buildings, primarily what we own in the midtown area as well as downtown, have, as you undoubtedly are aware, had suffered considerably in the '90s, certainly the first few years in the '90s.
Rockefeller Center, the premier property, can't get a better location. Bankrupt.
What happened to Rockefeller Center is what happened to so much real estate in and around the city of New York and in truth around the country, particularly office buildings. An oversupply, major oversupply in the 80s, substantial diminution in rentals in the 90s, decline in value in the 90s, inability to cover the debt service in the 90s. That's what happened to Rockefeller Center, and that's what's happened to many office buildings around the city.
I'm only concerned not with what happened, what's going to happen. Tell us the future.
What you're seeing today, interestingly enough, is an increment in values today. Rentals are firming. Space is being absorbed, primarily because there's no new construction. And when there's no new construction, and you have firms with increasing needs for office space, and certainly you can just look at the communications industry that's come into the city in a very major way, that's expanding in New York very, very substantially. What simply happened is they're occupying more space, and as they occupy more space, absorbing the current supply, what it will ultimately lead to are firming of rents. Diminution, for example, in tenant work allowances, diminution in concessions, upfront concessions for free rent, and the result will be increments in value of the buildings themselves.
Larry, just help us with one thing. Most of our viewers are not the Tishmans, are not the Urises, and not the big developers. They're people who are either looking for apartments that Barbara would advise them where to buy, or they're small investors with a small amount of money who would also like to be rich, who would also like to invest their money as best as possible and get a great return. Where should they go?
The small investor, I would think, would do well today to acquire an apartment if they occupy it, be it a condo or a co-op, because I think those values are once again going to rise. The small investor would also probably be well advised to look at real estate investment trusts as a mechanism.
That's a stock.
That's a stock but it's a stock that is directed toward the ownership and development of real estate. And clearly, real estate values are going to rise perceptibly in the near-term and long-term future. They've come down very substantially from where they were at the end of the 80s, and by golly, those values are now clearly on the rise in a very material fashion.
Let me ask you a business decision, Larry. In the 80s, everything was condo. Now you're selling almost 1,800, you're renting 1,800 apartments as opposed to selling where you can get your money right out. Why is that?
The market today for rental housing in New York has never been stronger. It's as good as it's ever been. And certainly in the 40 or close to 50 years that I've been in this business, I haven't seen a market such as exists today.
It's a tight market.
Very tight. And so there's enormous need for rental housing. People, young people today, are still coming into New York in a very major fashion. I'm on the board of NYU. We've never had applicants to the extent that we have them today from all over the world, not just the city of New York, not just the United States, but from all countries around the world, because New York is perceived, and in reality is, the world-class city. It is perceived and is the place to be. And so just as young people come here to learn and to study, others come here to seek work, to seek opportunity, to seek new jobs and entry-level functions, and those people need facilities as never before, and those are people who are renting today and who need new apartments.
Barbara, everything in life I've found is risk-reward. Where is the best risk for the best reward?
Definitely West 42nd Street. Right?
That's well said, Barbara.
A politician, the next mayor of New York City. Where to put the money, Barbara? That's what I want to know. That's what the people want to know. Everybody wants to be successful. Everybody wants to invest the best way they can. Real estate's the answer. Where should they do it?
If you're buying for yourself to live there, a luxury apartment in the best location in town. And if you want an investment vehicle, a smaller apartment in an offbeat location.
I would agree with that.
And what about commercial real estate? If somebody wants to invest in commercial, how do they get started in it?
Best thing to do is probably the way we did it initially. Take a small amount of money, pool the resources of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of your friends, buy a small building together, and let it grow. Develop it, improve it, enhance its value by modernization, alteration, renovation. And in time, the value of the rents in that building will reflect the improved condition of that building. And as values increase, as the value of the building increases, the mortgageability of that building will increase as well. Ultimately, it's saleable in all probability for a price higher than what you paid for it, and that gives you the capacity of going on and acquiring a second property.
Larry, every successful man such as yourself has made mistakes. What mistakes can you share with us that would avoid pitfalls for our viewers?
I think the primary mistake in, I'd say, the annals of real estate ownership, real estate development, is endeavoring to do too much too quickly, and to recognize the importance of staging whatever activities you're undertaking. Do it consciously, recognizing what the downside possibilities are, and recognizing as well that everything has a limitation, and to take it in slow, easy steps. What we've seen, unfortunately, we've seen some enormous development interests go asunder because of overextension in times when conditions were beyond their control.
Larry Silverstein from Silverstein Properties, thank you very much for appearing on Lawline. Barbara Corcoran, it's always a pleasure to have you. President of the Corcoran Group, one of the largest real estate brokerages in the city. And as always, this is Alan Schnorman, and thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111. This program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law.